I came across a post on social media recently that made me pause. It said, "I've always disliked the phrase pull yourself up by your bootstraps because it's often used to make people feel like they should be able to overcome systemic obstacles on their own, or that they deserve to fail if they don't." That part stayed with me. Because if we're honest, that idea shows up everywhere. In how we talk about success, in how we talk about poverty, and yes, even in how we talk about education. It sounds good. Work hard, stay focused, push through. But here's the question we don't ask enough. What happens when hard work isn't enough? Welcome back to the Advocate Podcast, where we challenge the narratives surrounding schools and equip families, educators, and communities with the knowledge they need to advocate effectively for our children. I'm your host, Dr. Christy N. Love. And over the last few episodes, we've been building a conversation. We talked about early literacy and long-term outcomes. We've talked about experts that demonstrated that literacy is not just an education issue, it's a justice issue. But today, we're going to zoom out because literacy is just one piece of a much bigger picture. Today, we're going to talk about the story we've been told and the truth we need to understand. Let's go.
Dr. Christy N. Love is an experienced educator and advocate dedicated to empowering students and families to ensure children receive a high-quality education. She specializes in culturally responsive teaching, restorative practices, and social-emotional learning, helping schools create supportive and inclusive environments. Through the Advocate Podcast, she amplifies voices, challenges inequitable systems, and keeps children at the center of every conversation.
Most of us were raised on some version of the same message. If you work hard enough, if you make the right choices, if you stay focused, you will succeed. And if you don't, well, you didn't try hard enough. That's the bootstrap narrative. And on the surface, it sounds motivating. But underneath it, there's an assumption. The assumption that everyone is starting from the same place. And that is simply not true. Because effort is real. Yes, it's real, but so is access. So is opportunity. So is exposure. And when we ignore those things, we don't just oversimplify success, we disguise failure. Let's talk about what we actually see if we're willing to look. There are communities in this country where children grow up with limited access to early learning opportunities, fewer safe, enriching spaces, and under-resourced schools. And when you look around some of these neighborhoods, you notice patterns. You may see more high-interest payday loan services than banks, more liquor stores than bookstores, fewer libraries, and fewer spaces designed for youth development. And this is not about judging communities. This is about asking a real question. What are children being exposed to, and what are they not? Because exposure matters. Exposure to language, exposure to opportunity, exposure to possibility. And when that exposure is limited, it shapes outcomes. Not because children aren't capable, but because the environment is not equally resourced. Now, this is where we have to be honest. The patterns we see today didn't just happen. There were policies in this country that shaped communities very intentionally. Housing policies, lending practices, school funding structures. And while those policies may not exist in the same way today, their impact didn't just disappear. It compounded over time across generations. Even something like Brown versus Board of Education, which we celebrate, had consequences we don't talk about enough, whether they were intentional or unintentional consequences, they exist. As schools integrated, many Black teachers lost their jobs. Black students were placed in environments where they were not always understood or valued. Cultural connections in education were disrupted. And over time, we began to see patterns. The overrepresentation of Black boys in special education, disproportionate discipline, and lowered expectations. So even what we celebrate as progress did not always lead to equity. And today, those patterns still show up, just in different ways. We see it in how schools are funded, how discipline is assigned, how students are labeled, and how opportunities are distributed. We see it in employment patterns, where access to stable, well-paying jobs is not always equal. And when employment opportunities are limited, it impacts families, it impacts communities, and it impacts what children see as possible. Because children don't just listen to what we say, they watch what they see. And when systems create barriers, those barriers don't just affect individuals, they shape entire environments. And we even see this tension play out in real time. We hear conversations about merit, right? About earning opportunities, about who deserves access. And at the same time, we see how inconsistently that standard is applied. Because if we're going to talk about merit, we have to be honest about access. We have to be honest about opportunity. And we have to be honest about the systems that determine who gets a chance in the first place. Because merit without equity is not merit at all. It's access rebranded. So now let's bring this back to real life. A child walks into a school. But that child does not walk in as a blank slate. They bring with them their environment, their experiences, their level of exposure, their opportunities or lack of them. And when that child struggles, we often default to one question: what's wrong with this child? Instead of asking, what has this child had access to? What support has this child received? What barriers might this child be navigating? That shift in thinking changes everything. And part of that shift has to include our language. Because for so long, we've used terms like at risk to describe children without stopping to ask, at risk of what? At risk because of who they are, or at risk because of the conditions surrounding them. See, when we label children as at risk, we unintentionally center the problem on the child instead of the systems and circumstances they're navigating. But what if we shifted that language? What if instead of at risk, we started saying at promise? Because every child is filled with promise. And when we change the way we speak about children, we begin to change the way we see them. And when we change the way we see them, we change how we teach them, support them, and advocate for them. This is why the bootstrap myth is so dangerous. Even Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. challenged this idea. He said, "It is cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps." In other words, we cannot expect people to succeed without first acknowledging what they've been denied. Preach, preacher. Because it doesn't just oversimplify success, it places blame where understanding is needed. It tells people if you don't make it, it's your fault, while ignoring unequal starting points, systemic barriers, differences in access and opportunity. And over time, that narrative doesn't just shape how we see others, it shapes how people see themselves. And that is exactly why next week's episode matters so much. Because next week, we're going to hear a real story. A story of a young man who became a father as a teenager, who stepped into responsibility very early, who worked, who sacrificed, who showed up. And yes, he succeeded. But not because he simply worked harder. You're going to hear about the role of community, the power of expectation, the influence of mentors, and even the missed opportunities along the way. Because real stories, honest stories, help us move beyond myths and into understanding. The truth is, no one pulls themselves up alone. And the sooner we stop pretending they do, the sooner we can start building systems that actually support our children. Because our children deserve more than a narrative. They deserve access, opportunity, and advocacy. Thank you for joining me on the Advocate Podcast. And I'll see you next week for a conversation you don't want to miss. Until next time, keep asking the hard questions, keep showing up for children, and keep advocating. Because children deserve adults who won't stop fighting for them. Be blessed.